Hey guys, welcome back to the Puro Wrestling Academy. I am, of course, Mr. Ray Russell. It's been a while, guys. Actually, it's been a short, brief summer session. We took a little time off, but we're back now. It is now time to reintroduce you guys to the man with the plan, the professor of Puro Wrestling himself, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Professor Dan, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for having me back. Although it is summer, you are all relegated to summer school, and because of that, class is still in session.
Wow, mandatory summer school, but I'm actually happy to be here, so that's okay.
We've got good stuff to talk about, Ray.
Absolutely.
This is 1957. Things change every year, but this year is of particular importance, and we're going to get to it. There's a lot of things to talk about. A lot of things happen. There's footage that is now available from 1957 for Japanese wrestling.
Yes.
That is nice to have, because for the last few years, we're getting short clips or 10-minute clips of matches. And now we're getting the full Monty, if you will.
Yeah, I've been going through some of it. I've really been enjoying it and getting to see how some of these guys worked and operated kind of smooth for some of these guys who are really just breaking into the business. And, of course, the Gaijin coming over. So it's been really cool. And, of course, as the years progress, we'll have more and more footage to go through. So looking forward to all of that. But hopefully all of the fans, the listeners out there in the States enjoyed their 4th of July holiday as we come back in 2024. But now we go back to 1957, Dan, in Japan. We debuted this on the last episode, and we're back here again with another keynotes here to kick off the show.
Great. You want to go over those keynotes so the
Absolutely.
Listeners know what to expect over the next 9 hours marathon podcast?
I thought you were going to give me 7 hours of NFL football. But
not really. If it goes more than an hour and a half, you guys are lucky. We don't want to hurt you.
So, keynotes this week. We're going to cover the year of 1957, hopefully all the way through here. And it's all going to kick off with Rikidozan's send-off tour. I feel like we've done that before. Rikidozan going to leave for the States once again, but not before he has another send-off tour here in the month of January. From there, of course, he's going to head back to the United States, travel to Hawaii, the West Coast, of course, San Francisco, Idaho, Utah, but he's going to make a special trip to St. Louis, and we'll have more on that later in the program. But I want to go back real quick to the send-off tour. We're going to talk about some outside talent coming back, and very interesting. We're going to get into some fun details there, so stay tuned for that. Another name that popped up last time we talked, and this time even more prominent, and I love the story you're going to be sharing with everybody here this week. Talking about Hiro Matsuda. We're going to hear about what Hiro thought, early thoughts of Rikidozan.
Yeah, Hiro Matsuda is a legend, not just in Japanese wrestling, but in all of wrestling. Ask Hulk Hogan about Hiro Matsuda. Ask Lex Luger about Hiro Matsuda. You may remember him, or you may have seen him as a manager for Flair in 1989, I believe it was, after J.J. Dillon may have left. He was Eddie Graham's one of his favorite guys because he was a legit shooter, and he would hook and he would twist up the guys and injure the football players that would wander into the gym thinking that they could beat those fake wrestlers. And he's got a long storied history, and we're going to be able to start it. And he is a legend in Japan, too. He was very highly regarded. And talk about a rebel. Wait till you hear his story. I think you'll be impressed.
I certainly was. I had never heard this story before, so I'm looking forward to getting it out there. And, you start talking about the names that Hiro helped break in. I mean, think about all throughout the 1970s, all the way down to Ron Simmons. Damn, that's a lot of people. And Bob Roop has shared so many stories when he was working the Florida territory about Hiro Matsuda. Hopefully more to come there as well. But yeah, can't wait to get to the story here we have this week about Hiro. As also here in the notes I have for this week, keynotes, JWA securing a TV deal. Now we know that they've aired wrestling events on TV before, but this is their actual very first TV deal they're going to be securing, and you're going to tell us all the details here this week, Dan. As Rikidozan, we talked about, send-off tour, he went back to the States. Well, he returns in time for the Summer Series here in Japan, taking place over the course of June and July, but it doesn't end there. 2 more tours later in the year, August and September. It's the International Competitions Tour, and then finally in October, the Pro Wrestling World Championship Tour. You heard me right, guys. And indeed, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Thesz on his way to Japan.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and we know that Rikidozan's been angling for this for at least a calendar year now, but he finally secured a deal to bring Lou Thesz to Japan, and of course, he's going to get a shot at that NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
Nostradamus, Rikidozan.
Oh, that's true.
Whipper Watson was the NWA champion, but Rikidozan somehow knew all along that somehow Lou Thesz would be champion here in 1957.
I'd like to think that Lou Thesz would be a better draw regardless. I mean, the NWA title has cachet to it, but Whipper Billy Watson was not quite at the, what do they call it, the Q rating, the popularity level of Lou Thesz, who even in late 1957, he had been champion for how long then? A long time.
He's going to continue to hold the NWA title more often than not for the next several years. So Lou Thesz certainly has a big background as an NWA world champion, very well known. And you're right. I mean, no disrespect to Whipper Watson, who by all accounts was a great pro wrestler, but at the same time, he didn't have, as you said, the cachet of a Lou Thesz, the name value of a Lou Thesz. So I'm sure Ricky was very happy that he got Thesz here in this situation.
Yep. I don't want to understate the other talking point that we had brought up just a minute ago.
Yes. JWA
securing a television time slot. This is always super important for any promotion. It's still the same case in 2024. This was 67 years ago, and it was just as important then. When you have a sponsor, when you have a guaranteed way to promote your show, that weekly wrestling show really is a commercial, a 1-hour commercial for the house shows in your area. And it is vital to the lifeblood of a promotion. Without TV coverage, good luck to you. And even Rikidozan knew that. So this was something that he had been trying for a while, a regular weekly show as opposed to the every once in a while first couple shows of a tour, final show of a tour. That doesn't add up to a lot of television coverage. So we'll get more into that, but regular weekly TV or semi-weekly TV is a major, major deal for Rikidozan here in 1957.
Yeah, I didn't mean to downplay it. I was just trying to save it up for later, but I absolutely totally agree with you, and I'm glad you broke that down and keeping everybody alert as to what's to come here later in the show. Also later in the show, somewhere on that October tour featuring Lou Thesz, there's going to be an incident where the floor will actually collapse, injuring some of the fans, the onlookers there of an event. So stay tuned for that little, I want to call it a fun story, Dan, but probably not fun for the people that were injured in that situation. Then from there also, guys, perhaps a deeper look, or at least a look, at Taionobori, who's kind of been in and out. Remember, he didn't make his debut when he was supposed to. He would miss a tour and then, take part in the next one. And now he's off to the United States to continue to hone his craft. So maybe we'll look a little bit into Taionobori at the end of the program. But that's it, guys. Those are the keynotes this week, Dan. So if you're ready, we can get rolling.
I am ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we'll start at the beginning. When the year 1957 began, all the wrestling groups were in a slump. Rikidozan invited Adrian Baillargeon to Japan and had him appear. Thanks. Well, it's almost French, right?
It's
Frenchish.
French-Canadian.
Baillargeon to Japan and had him appear on a popular TV show. So this is another instance in the 80s and in the 70s. This was happening all the time in wrestling, where they were having wrestlers appear on other network TV shows that had high ratings to kind of promote them. And here it's happening in 1957, Rikidozan showing off Adrian Baillargeon to the Japanese public and saying, I'm going to fight this guy soon. To the viewer's surprise, he lifted the host of the show aloft with one hand, but his superhuman strength didn't lead to any large attendance at his matches, and we'll cover that. So they did a great job promoting him.
Really quick on Baillargeon, he was one of 6 brothers in the wrestling business, but they also did, I don't want to call it a circus show or a sideshow, but they all had feats of strength and things of that nature that they would do. And Baillargeon, this one, Adrian, I should say, of the 6 brothers, his gimmick was typically the guy who would get down almost in a push-up position and lift things on his shoulders, like, say, a group of people standing on a plank or something of that nature. So he was a strong man in many ways, even though he was very fit, very thin, lean, if you will. But born in 1918, didn't debut in wrestling until 1950, but obviously honing that other craft in the meantime, the special feats of strength and whatnot. But don't let that fool you. He was very acrobatic, very nimble as well.
Well, what better way to come from the sideshow or the circus and continue to be what he essentially is, a performer, a physical performer in the world of pro wrestling. That is a smooth transition. Wasn't it Farmer Burns that was doing the same thing in the late 1800s? They were like traveling carnival shows with the very first, what we'd call pro wrestlers, physical performers. And wrestling is a physical performance.
And Rikidozan needs himself an opponent for this tour. Now, Baillargeon, not exactly the name that some of these other talents that he'd been bringing in here, like the Sharp Brothers, for instance. Instead, this is a different type of talent, but you have to wonder, maybe he's saving a couple bucks because this is a short tour that he's doing to send himself off back to the States again. But also on this tour, Dan, is a fellow by the name of Black Jimmy. And thus it begins the voyage to figure out who this Black Jimmy character was. In fact, I found out that he wasn't even black.
Well, it is 1957, and we should have warned you that the news coverage of wrestling in this time was sparse. And a lot of things were shrouded in mystery, even more so than normal for pro wrestling. And Black Jimmy is a mysterious character. There are theories on who what his true identity is. And we can get to that once we get into some of these cards. This Rikidozan U.S. send-off match tour, it only lasts, it's 12 cards spread out over 4 weeks. So there really isn't much going on here. And when you look at only bringing in 3 outsiders, Baillargeon, Black Jimmy, and Dutch Mueller, I can't imagine that's costing a whole lot. Everyone else is homegrown talent, and we've seen plenty of those cards where it's like 9 matches, and it's like a tag match with the outsiders and a singles match at the end. And everyone else is just wrestling everyone else every single time.
Right.
This does not look like a promotion that is spending a lot of money. Because look at these names. I mean, he had to promote Baillargeon just so people would know that he was a person.
Right.
It wasn't like you could put his name on a poster and have anyone react to it. So maybe Black Jimmy provided more of the mystery for this tour.
Yeah, Dutch Mueller, I have nothing on that character either. I didn't really do a whole lot of digging, but I couldn't find anything on the brief amount of time I was Googling Dutch, so I'm not really sure if that was a pseudonym for another wrestler, or if that was just another guy they found on one of those army bases or something along those lines. Which
you took the words right out of my mouth. The smart money is he was just one of the other more athletic guys on one of these army bases, or what do they call it? The military assets where they were overseeing the Japan rebuilding efforts.
Right.
Anywho, we can move on and just start talking about some of these shows if you like. We can pick out some interesting matches if there are any, mainly just to see how every local guy, every native JWA guy, if anyone's moving up and down the ladder at all on the cards.
Yeah, I noticed that there's some use of the light heavyweight and junior heavyweight titles here with the champion Surigami, the junior champion, Yoshino Sato, the light heavyweight champion. But outside of that, anything that catches your eye, I'll scroll along with you and we'll touch base here. Of course, the main event, best I can tell every night, is definitely Rikidozan and Baillargeon.
Spoiler alert, it's Rikidozan versus Baillargeon. So January 4th, 1957 out of Osaka, we do have the Japanese light heavyweight title being defended. Yoshino Sato defeats Kiyotaka Otsubo 2-1. That's for the light heavyweight title. The junior heavyweight title pits Michiaki Yoshimura versus Surigami. And Surigami is the winner of the first fall, but Yoshimura gets the next 2 falls. But Surigami retains because Yoshimura didn't win any of them by pinfall.
They were forfeit.
So we already have a schmoz finish here. And in the main event, Rikidozan goes to a 1-1. I guess we call it a draw against Adrian Baillargeon. Now, this card would be aired on NHK TV from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on a Friday, and the top 3 matches ended up being on TV, which we had already talked about. Torianbori beat Shiro Tsukikaze, and that got on the show. And Yoshimura's match against Surigami got on the show, which is interesting because Yoshino Sato, I don't see him on this show.
Yeah, no light heavyweight title match, the broadcast on TV.
That is interesting to me. But that's what
looking like Vince McMahon there, just keeping the light heavyweights off the card, off the television, right?
Hey, that was the one thing WCW had for the longest time, is that's where you got to see the juniors wrestle.
Absolutely.
It was easy to forget all the plodding main event matches when you could watch the juniors. January 5th, 1957, still in Osaka. We'll just go to the TV matches because they were on TV. Millions of people got to see these matches. It's the next day. This is Saturday, January 5th, and this is on Osaka TV, 4:30 to 6, KR TV, 4:30 to who knows when. The top two matches show up, which is Yoshino Sato versus Otsubo. Again, this time it makes it on TV, and Yoshino Sato wins. And the next one is, of course, Rikidozan against Baillargeon, and that just says Rikidozan beat him. So it wasn't a draw on the second night.
So it's kind of interesting. So we questioned why would the Tayanobori preliminary match go on TV the first night and not the light heavyweight title match, but it looks like Rikidozan, decent booking here, don't want to show the same guys on every TV program, mixes it up. He saves the Yoshino Sato match for the second night of TV. So kind of makes sense now. The booking makes a little more sense to me anyway.
Well, it does allow him to rotate some of the guys that he likes through television over these successive nights, where it's always going to be him, but he can rotate the other guys, and get a chance for everyone to see guys like Surigami and Yoshino Sato and Toyombori. If Endo was here, if Kokichi Endo was in Japan at the time, I'm sure he'd be in the mix as well. So this part, I agree with you. It makes sense that they did that. Those were the only two shows for that week, January 4th and 5th. We jumped straight to January 12th, and this is in Okinawa. And there's one reason we're bringing up the results of this show.
Okay.
Main event, Rikidozan draws against Adrian Baillargeon. A Surigami tag against Yusuf Turk and Yoshino Sato. Nothing out of the ordinary except for this one match. Yasuhiro Kojima beat Masafumi Okuma. And you may not know Yasuhiro Kojima, because his wrestling name would later be known as Hiro Matsuda.
Mm-hmm.
And he told Koji Miyamoto, who is a Japanese historian, that something unexpected happened at the beginning of the show. A local karate expert offered to challenge to Rikidozan. And Kojima, or Matsuda, I'll just call him Matsuda.
Right.
Matsuda was told to go stand in for Rikidozan. He's not going to get his hands dirty. Take care of this karate nerd. And he did defeat Paul K. Morse, a U.S. soldier. That's funny. So he had the match against Masafumi Okuma and then had a match against Paul K. Morse. And he put away the loudmouth challenger in just 7 minutes. He was expected to be praised for his victories when he returned to the dressing room. Instead, Rikidozan slapped his face a couple of times and shouted at him, "Why didn't you play around with that karate guy much longer to please the audience?" Matsuda was infuriated by Rikidozan's unreasonable bullying. To settle things peacefully, Toyombori soothed him with comforting words, saying, quote, and we have a quote from 1957, I love it. "Our boss is a twisted person. He must be glad about your performance at heart, but he can't be genuinely grateful to you," unquote. Matsuda had no choice but to suppress his anger, but at that point, any respect he had for Rikidozan vanished completely. So it looks like...
just to break that down, so this karate expert comes in there and he says, "I challenge you, Rikidozan," and Rikidozan says, "I don't have time for that. Go that youngster over there, Hiro Matsuda, that rookie over there, throw him in the ring." And so he goes in there and he does business. 7 minutes is pretty long enough, I'd say. It's what it's quoted here anyway. It goes 7 minutes with this karate guy and scores the win, does Hiro Matsuda. So 2 wins here for Matsuda on this card. One wasn't even planned, I guess. And then he comes to the back, and instead of being proud of him, Hiro's all, puffing out his chest, maybe like, "Yes, I did it. All right. I made the boss proud." And Rikidozan slaps him. And not that Inoki slap of respect or whatever you want to call it, but instead it's Rikidozan upset. "Hey, why didn't you make it go longer out there? Why didn't you give us a better show?" And I could see Hiro Matsuda being upset here.
Yeah, I totally sympathize with Hiro Matsuda. I think there's a million ways that Rikidozan could have said, "Hey, good job taking care of that guy," right after you already had a match. But in the future, if you have to do that, don't forget you've got an audience out there. If you know you've got this guy, if you know you can handle him, stretch it out a little bit. Put on a bit of a show once you're comfortable. But instead, he didn't do that, and he had to knock him down. And that was par for the course for Rikidozan. I mean, how many more reports do we have to hear about Rikidozan being kind of a psycho like that and being rude and violent?
I was going to say, how crazy is it that of all people, is Tayanobori trying to talk sense, make sense of Rikidozan. Like, even he's like,
that is a good point. For future reference, when Tayanobori is the
voice of reason,
the voice of reason in a conflict, you are in trouble.
But it's so funny. It's almost like never meet your heroes, right? Because I'm not saying Matsuda looked up to Rikidozan in that fashion, but at the same time, he probably expected more of him, respected him a lot more as the businessman, as a professional wrestler, as someone to study under, so to speak. And instead, he's like, this guy is for lack of a better term, a piece of shit, at least in Matsuda's eyes.
And he's a rookie. He'd be the last guy to know to stretch a match out with a legitimate opponent once you know you've got him on the ropes.
Right.
I think Rikidozan is expecting Matsuda to know more about the business than he should. It's just unreasonable, and it's unfortunate, and there's a lot of unfortunate things that happen when you're around Rikidozan, and we'll hear more about him going forward.
Yeah, for at least another 6 years anyway.
That's true. Yep, 6 more years of Rikidozan. So January 13th in Okinawa, another draw between him and Baillargeon. Matsuda beats Paul Masses. Who knows who that is? He didn't show up as one of the outsiders coming in, so I'm wondering if he's another guy from a military base who agreed to participate. I do have information from the 14th of January. January 14th was a win for Rikidozan. It's recorded as 2-0. It was a pin in 26 minutes, 30 seconds, and then the second shows up as a forfeit, but it shows up as 2 falls.
2 straight falls, I guess, technically. Rikidozan comes out the winner, and that one, it's been a draw every night up until this point, so, that January 18th show they have upcoming here, it's canceled, but it's canceled for a reason. I don't know if you have it in the notes you're looking at right now, but as I was scrolling through and I was going through things, I noticed that their matchup on the 18th in Yokohama was canceled because of poor attendance, poor drawing ticket sales.
That's exactly what I have. The scheduled event on the 18th was canceled and postponed to February 1st. The audience was informed that tickets for this day would be valid for that day.
Now, I want to be clear here. The show wasn't canceled. Their match was canceled. The rest of the show went on. Can you imagine paying for that show? I mean, yeah, if you come back, I'm not buying tickets. That's bad business. Well, we're not going to go on because there's not enough people in the crowd for us, the main eventers, to perform, but we'll put on the undercard for you.
Yeah, we'll put on an undercard, so I guess it's better than canceling outright, but I think the last time they did that, they had a riot?
Riot?
People were
that was when he was in the frickin' hospital. This time he's perfectly fine. He just doesn't see enough people out there to work in front of.
The force field around Rikidozan that causes trouble, it just must have been palpable back in 1957. I don't know what's going on near this guy. Just avoid him if you can. So we do have the 3 matches. Takeo Kaneko defeats Yasuhiro Kojima. There is a note that they thought this was his debut. Now, maybe it's his in-ring wrestling debut as a full-blown wrestling match, as opposed to an exhibition, which I think the other performance was. It showed up as an exhibition match in his first match, and then the karate guy obviously was, I don't know what that is, an exhibition or a shoot. This might have been his first, you're on the roster and you're being considered a real wrestler. And that happened on January 18th. So this guy hadn't even debuted officially, and Rikidozan was already giving him crap for not working with a karate fighter well enough. Oy, oy, oy. Toshiichi Higa defeated Yonataro Tanaka, and in a tag match, Hideyuki Nagasawa and Yoshino Sato defeated Osama Abe and Masaki Takamura. So those are the 3 matches people got to see on the 18th. The main event was canceled for low attendance, but they promised to come back in a couple weeks.
So we'll have to wait and see if they actually do or not. I believe they do, but I'm just scrolling through and, yeah.
We do, but we have no attendance, so now it's a mystery, or at least my notes don't have an attendance for that February 1st show, so maybe they just said, no, I guess we have to have it now because we know we have some people with tickets. We'd get in trouble if we didn't. They skip a week and they come back to Sagamihara on January 25th. Nothing of note. I see Azuma Fuji defeats Surigami, but that's all I see.
Well, he should, based on the size difference there.
Yeah, you would think. On January 31st in Tachikawa,
Rikidozan gets the straight up win there over Baillargeon.
He does get a win. He does get a win as opposed to a draw over Baillargeon. And we're leading to the next match is the February 1st match, the makeup date in Yokohama.
The end of the tour.
Correct. And let's see if we have anything interesting. Matsuda's getting draws over Tamanokawa, so at least he's getting draws. So in spite of the dust-up a couple weeks earlier, it appears that he's being used, and they're not burying him. Oh, I see it now. Do you see the middle match?
I do.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute, because I think that we'll just save that for the end of the story. Rikidozan, on February 1st, 1957, Yokohama, defeats Adrian Baillargeon, ostensibly in front of a larger crowd than on the 18th. And Azuma Fuji beats Torianbori. So we've got the top guys. It's the same old thing with Rikidozan. You know who's going to be in the top two matches, and nothing really has changed. But I will say there was a guy, Tomio Miyajima, defeats Black Jimmy, but there's some research, and I've got something I need to get off my chest regarding Black Jimmy.
Well, please do, but you said there's research. I mean, that's an understatement. This whoever researched, there's too much research on Black Jimmy. Somebody really went the distance for this one.
It is. There's pictures too. I didn't include some of the pictures in the notes because they were so fuzzy you couldn't even tell what was happening. So this little story is titled The True Identity of Black Jimmy. In 1957, January, before Rikidozan's trip to America, with the main objectives of inviting Lou Thesz and signing a contract to challenge for the NWA World Championship. How could he do that if he didn't know that he was going to have it? Japan Pro Wrestling held a series of Rikidozan's America Send-Off Pro Wrestling Tournament. The only foreign wrestler invited from the Americas was Adrian Baillargeon, the third son of the famous Baillargeon six brothers. He participated under the title of Latin champion and fought Rikidozan one-on-one for several days. But there was a wrestler named Black Jimmy who participated in the final match of the series, held at the Flyer Gym in Yokohama City on February 1st. Jimmy lost by pinfall to Tomio Miyajima in a 30-minute singles match, but what kind of wrestler was he? First, let's take a look at the magazine article that featured the results of Jimmy's matches. It says Jimmy was a U.S. military camp champion, so perhaps he was working at the U.S. military's Tachikawa Air Base and was the wrestling champion there. Makes sense. He uses key lock and dojimi otoshi moves, so he doesn't seem to have been just a puppet. He's not a slug. He actually knows how to do some things. It says in the magazine article that he's a size bigger than Miyajima, but Miyajima was 180 pounds at the time, and Jimmy was 200. The same document shows Jimmy on that day, and he looks like a white wrestler. But why was he named Black when he wasn't a black wrestler? Was it meant to mean villain? I agree with the writer of this article, and I also do declare that Black Jimmy is actually Jimmy Glarg.
Oh, the build-up, the anticipation, and there it was. You know, there's so much, detail and notes here to get to the end of that story in the notes. So anybody really interested, head into the, insanely detailed show notes. I worked a lot of Dan's notes in there, especially specifically about Black Jimmy, a.k.a. apparently Jimmy Glarg. I had to pop for that when I saw where it was going. And, you watch a movie, sometimes it doesn't end the way you want it to, but that worked out for me. I was really excited. That just shows you what kind of world I live in. But yeah, I was sitting there like, tell me this is where it's going. And after, several pages of information, that's where we wind up. Black Jimmy, a.k.a. Jimmy Glarg.
I'm no merch expert, but I feel like there's a market out there for a t-shirt that says Justice for Jimmy Glarg.
Jimmy Glarg has been working with Rikidozan in some way, shape, or form for 3 years now. So he must have liked his work a little bit.
Yep, he's been here since basically day one. He is a standby and a mainstay of Japan Pro Wrestling. Maybe lost to the sands through the sands of history, but we're bringing him back, and we want to make sure everybody knows that Jimmy Glarg was large and in charge once upon a time.
Yeah, I'm going to make Jimmy Glarg popular again.
Okay,
or so for the first time.
That's not a nice thing. Words hurt too. So after this tour ended, it was only 12 shows. Rikidozan left to wrestle in Hawaii. And on his first night there, he teamed with Torianbori and Kokichi Ando to win 2 out of 3 falls from Tom Rice, Lord Layton, and Charo Azteca. The following week, after going to a draw with Lucky Siminovich, he left for Northern California. and he'll do some more things. But I don't know if I want to cover anything else about his Hawaiian tour. He didn't spend a ton of time there.
No, the only thing I would touch on, Dan, in that regards is if you notice, Kokichi Endo still there. He's working a ton in the States, and we talked a little offline about why that may be. So we might touch on that at the end of this episode. If not, we will definitely be getting into that by the next episode, 1958. But on top of that, too, I noticed you said Tai Onobori. So he apparently leaves right around the same time Ricky does after this tour, and he goes over and begins working in the United States as well. And he's going to continue to do that for quite a while here in the year, maybe most of the year.
Yeah, he gets a long run in the States, or at least out of Japan. And that goes to show you what they think of Torianbori and what they think his future can be. I say this is an unmitigated push of a large degree. And for him to spend that much time getting seasoned, that sounds like they're intending to bring him back and push him even farther up the card. Maybe reinventing the three-headed snake with Rikidozan, Torianbori, and Kokichi Endo. I don't know.
That's definitely a downgrade on Kimura anyway.
It's not. It's like in basketball that when they talk about the top three guys and you go from Bird and Parrish and Kevin McHale and you move down to the newer versions of the top three guys, and it's not quite the same.
Yeah, you're a Boston guy. I gotcha.
I was stuck here. I was born here. Hey, I put up with a lot of crap. Oh, my God. How long did the Red Sox lose for? Yeah, that was never ending.
Hey, man.
And the Patriots were terrible.
I deal with Cleveland. You don't have to preach to me. So.
Well, you've got a good coach. Is your coach still the manager for the Cleveland Indians? Is that
no, he retired. Yeah, he retired.
That's too bad. Nice guy. He really got railroaded out of Boston. That was not a good situation. And you know what else wasn't a good situation? When Rikidozan went to San Francisco and teamed up with great wrestlers such as Leo Nomalini, Enrico Torres, and Ronnie Etchison to face the Baillargeon brothers.
Oh, revenge time now.
Then Ben Sharp, talk about revenge, and Lord James. This says Bleachers. I'm going to call it Blears.
It's Blears.
And Hombre Montana.
One of my favorites.
This is like, I feel like we're going to become Northern California or just California wrestling experts by going through Rikidozan's exploits.
Somebody posted a match of Hombre Montana not too long ago on Twitter. I was marking out for it. Oh my God, there it is. All right. It's Hombre Montana. What a name. Tremendous wrestling name. Forgotten in time, and that's unfortunate.
I'm going through these. It looks like generally the same things. These only look like 3-match shows, which seems strange to me. But he did spend time in San Jose, Fresno, Stockton. We've gone through this before. At the first week of April, he finishes in San Jose in the San Francisco area. And Rikidozan then visits the territory of the Salt Lake Wrestling Club. And this organization was affiliated with the NWA and promoted by a man named Dave Reynolds. Judging by the name, it was probably in Salt Lake City, Utah. As of April 6th, the Western States heavyweight champion was Roy Shire. And this is just talking about going to the Utah-Idaho region, which I know nothing about the Utah-Idaho region as far as being NWA affiliated. So this is interesting. He has a match there against Tosh Togo. And at the time, he's still JWA, All Asia, and he's got all the other titles.
Right. I can't even count them all anymore.
But this is on April 6th and Saturday that he has that match against Tosh Togo. We have to jump all the way back to Japan, though, because on April 8th, they have a show, and Rikidozan's not on it.
Wow. That's pretty bold.
It's in Osaka, and they have, as the main event, the Japanese light heavyweight title match where Yoshino Sato defeats Isao Yoshihara. And in the junior heavyweight title match, you have Michiaki Yoshimura beating Surigami. And in this way, Yoshimura now wins the junior heavyweight title.
So Surigami loses the junior heavyweight title here April 8th, 1957. April 8th, that's my son's birthday. But when you have 40 kids, it's pretty much every day is their birthday. So
that's a good point. You really, there's no month that you can avoid. All the way back from the January 4th tour, we talked about Yoshimura and Surigami and Surigami retained the title because Yoshimura didn't get any pins on him.
Right.
He just got 2 forfeits.
Right.
Yoshimura would leave Toshio Yamaguchi's group and join the JWA on this. So this was something of a jump to allow Yoshimura come in from Toshio Yamaguchi's group, fight for the junior heavyweight title, and technically kind of win it, but not win it. So this to me looks like more of Rikidozan valuing Yamaguchi and throwing one of his guys a bone. And Michiaki Yoshimura is a good wrestler. And
well, if you think about it, when we were closing 56 or somewhere back in 56, they did a couple of those, I'll call it a Gym Wars show, the dojo, when they were bringing all Yamaguchi's guys to basically what the notes said anyway was to work out in front of Rikidozan. He was kind of picking and choosing who he wanted to bring into his company. And I guess Yoshimura would have been near the top of that ladder because here he is. Like you said, he gets the quote unquote win back in January, but here we are in April. And the next time around, and he's actually winning the championship, the junior title from Surigami, who's been a good trooper here for Rikidozan up until this point. So it's it says something about Yoshimura moving forward and the fact that not only is he the new junior champion, but he is plucked from the Yamaguchi company.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. Now that he's a title holder, I just wanted to reinforce the point that he kind of jumped from Toshio Yamaguchi's promotion and ended up taking the title. So that was something of note I wanted to mention. On the same day, though, back in the United States in Idaho Falls, Idaho, at the Idaho Falls Armory in Idaho Falls, Idaho.
Is that where that is?
Yeah, somewhere near Idaho. I can't be sure, though. We get some names that you may have heard before. Larry Montgomery draws Hardy Crustcamp, who we are aware of. Harry Lentz gets a win over Red Shoes Dugan. Is that Red Shoes Dugan as in referee Red Shoes Dugan?
Wow, Johnny Dugan.
No, yeah. He always looked in very good shape. I would not be stunned at all. We'll do some research. Maybe we'll hit you in the next episode, the 1958 episode. We'll add it to the errata, and we'll do some research on Red Shoes. It says Duggan, but I never trust the spelling of these translated things. The main event in this Idaho Falls card on April 8th, Rikidozan and Mike Mazursky go to some kind of a draw against Tosh Togo and the Great Sasaki. And the Great Sasaki is brought up in one of these prior shows. Great Sasaki is Hal Sasaki. Good old Hal. What a traditional Japanese name Hal is.
Well, at least it didn't say Harry.
Let me see. On that April 8th show, I just want to mention in the Japan show where they had the non-Rikidozan show, they had some wrestlers from Toa Pro Wrestling on the card as well. So it was kind of a multi-promotional card, especially if you consider Yoshimura still one of the invaders coming from Yamaguchi's Fed.
Right. Well, I figure with Rikidozan not there to be able to work the card, he probably pulled what he could from the top of maybe Yamaguchi's promotion in order to fill out the card. Not that they're Rikidozan level talent, but at the same time, it's like you got to get the best of what you can on there to at least draw whatever the hell they were drawing there.
That is true. We make it to the end of April, and Rikidozan goes back to San Francisco, leaving the Idaho area, and there's where he's joined by Torianbori, who had come from Hawaii to San Francisco. And the only known time the two wrestled at the same venue was on May 2nd, Modesto. Ray Stern would defeat Torianbori, and Rikidozan and Leo Nomalini would defeat Adrian Baillargeon and Lord James Blears. After that, though, that run, Rikidozan goes back to Hawaii. And that starts in the middle of May, and he's wrestling with the same guys. He brings Torianbori with him, so now they're both back in Hawaii. So you've got Endo, Rikidozan, and Torianbori all kind of bouncing around. Endo has stayed in Hawaii for quite a while, and Rikidozan is kind of bouncing around, and so is Torianbori. And Torianbori would stick around as well. There's a press conference held in the lobby of Tokyo International Airport when Rikidozan finally returns. And he says, quote, "I played 56 matches during this tour, and I've only lost 2 tag matches. Of the 27 matches listed here, there are 7 losses in tag matches. Wow. So only 2 is too few."
It's his story. He can tell it the way he wants to, right?
This may shock you.
Hey, you should have heard Jerry Lawler's version of his tour of Japan with Jimmy Valiant. They were world beaters over there. But
that was not a good mix.
No, I don't know who booked Jimmy Valiant to Japan, but oh my God.
Whoever came up with the phrase Styles makes fights made that phrase way before Jimmy Valiant and Jerry Lawler tried to go to Japan.
Woo, Mr. Babe, it lasted 1 week. And, before we get back to Japan, though, Rikidozan worked Hawaii, he worked San Francisco, he worked the Utah, Idaho territory, but he also made a stop over in St. Louis very quickly, if you want to tell them about that.
Yeah, so in the end of May, before he returned to Japan, he made a special visit to St. Louis to achieve his long sought-after goal of securing a world heavyweight title match in Japan. And he met at the Claridge Hotel with NWA president Sam Muchnick. And it was agreed that the champion, Lou Thesz at that time, would come to Japan for a tour. And it was really at that point just a matter of agreeing on price. The dates were from October 7th to October 25th, but there's a problem. Rikidozan's JWA, that organization is not a member of the NWA.
Uh-oh.
So Rikidozan, who is flush with cash, as we all know, wink, wink, was required to post a $10,000 bond with Muchnick for the Champions Tour.
Get him, Sam.
So he returned to Honolulu for one more match on May 12th, and then he made it back to Japan. So the biggest thing out of this whole deal after leaving in February to come back in June was to get that meeting with Sam Muchnick and nail down and confirm that the NWA heavyweight champion would come to Japan for 9 matches between October 7th and October 25th. As you might imagine, this is the first time it's ever happened. This guy is a promotional machine. He is looking to make serious bank on this tour with the NWA heavyweight champion.
Oh, yeah.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com, and to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnetty. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com youtube.com/wrestling grenade. And why not subscribe to youtube.com/wrestling grenade? And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series, covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia podcast network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. So it's all set. It seems it would be later in the year of 57 and the final tour of the year. Only 7 cards on that, but we'll get there later in October. The NWA World Champion Thesz coming to Japan to take on Rikidozan. Going to be very interesting. Hopefully we have some detailed results in regards to how many people they drew, but we'll have to wait and see there. Right now, though, I guess Rikidozan has finished up his tour of the States, and he's back in Japan. He's got several tours coming up, but I don't know if you want to go into the Summer Series tour right now or if you want to discuss the TV deal.
Well, I think the TV deal leads into the Summer Series. One of the other things that he had been trying to do, and this ended up happening when he wasn't even in Japan, was that Nippon TV succeeded in securing a financial partner for a weekly television program. Mitsubishi Electric, one of the leading companies in Japan, took on sponsorship of a weekly wrestling show. And their relationship would last until 1972.
Wow.
TV viewers would often see the young wrestlers vacuuming the mat using a Mitsubishi cleaner before the main event.
Get those commercials in there. I love it, man. It's amazing how new TV was in the 50s, and yet people knew how to use it to promote things. It's so amazing.
Yep, and back in the 50s and even in the 60s in the United States, they had live product placement. You had to be blind or deaf not to know who was sponsoring those shows, because the product placement was absolutely obscene on some of those shows.
Uh-huh.
So the first live TV wrestling program, Puro Fight Men Hour, aired on June 15th. Nippon TV broadcast the JWA matches from the Japan Pro Wrestling Center, otherwise known as the Rikidozan Dojo, 5 o'clock every Saturday evening. And not like you need to know this, but it's obvious that Rikidozan took full advantage of television to the point where he gave cameraman detailed instructions for camera positions or angles so that he would appear markedly attractive for TV viewers. One of the things we probably didn't talk much about in Rikidozan's training and excursions over to mainland USA and Hawaii, is that he was also picking the brains of the promoters on how to do that job of promoting a federation. And it looks like he even got advice on how to set up and how to run a studio TV show. Because basically, this is a studio wrestling show. Same building, a small venue. It's no different than Georgia or Florida or any of those other places. So he actually got advice on camera placement. That's how serious this guy was taking it. And,
it's pretty damn cool to see how early on, we talked about that I think last episode, Rikidozan, we come to the conclusion that he was sitting in Malkowicz's office learning, picking their brains, the promoters, the bookers, and things of that nature on how to do everything from every aspect. And I'm sure he did that in multiple places. And I'm not sure where he got the studio TV idea from, but it's clear that he talked to some important people that knew what they were talking about, because he seems to try to do this thing right out of the gate.
Yeah, he does hit the ground running, and this is the first time that Japan has been exposed to a weekly wrestling show, which had been so successful in America and still is for all this time. So he's copying something that is a known commodity, and it's just a technique that is super effective in promoting pro wrestling. There is a note here, and it's from a different source, but the claim is this Fight Men Hour show initially began without any sponsorship, but Mitsubishi Electric became its sponsor from the third week of July. And I have no reason to doubt that. Maybe Mitsubishi was interested, but wanted to see if they could kind of get it off the ground, just so they knew what they were sponsoring, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Major matches such as championship matches continue to be broadcast in a special time slot. So the major shows we're used to talking about on TV, they still happen, and they happen whenever they need to happen. First show of the tour, last show of the tour. This is all from the Rikidozan dojo, and it is the young man fight hour. It's mainly the young guys just getting exposure, which this is an investment in the undercard guys, trying to push them to move their way up the card. Uh-huh. At the same time, commercial TV starts to expand in Japan, so this is just going to get more eyeballs on Rikidozan's product. And it would last for 8 episodes and then take a break, and it would start up a little bit later, and we can go into that. But I just wanted to stop and talk about television. It started. He's got a weekly show now, and that is a huge help for him because he's been cash-strapped. Look, he had only 3 guys on the last tour and then disappeared for 6 months. Or, 4.5 months.
Yeah, so all this discussion about how big of a star he is in Japan, not just as a wrestler, but just as a personality. And then we talk about how he keeps going back to the States to pocket all that money to bring it back over to promote these successful shows, when deep down inside, maybe he doesn't have as much money as we think he does. But it's kind of confusing because we were looking at all of those stadium shows, those big shows, the numbers he was drawing at all those house shows back in 56, and it's like, where did that money go, Ricky?
Well, he did say he was building like apartment complexes and something about bicycle tracks and racehorses. It's hard to keep track of. As fast as the money was coming in, he was finding a way to spend it. He could have probably used for some financial advice, but he did not get that. Instead, what we get is Saturday, June 15th, 1957, from 5 o'clock to 6:15 p.m., the very first episode of Fight Men Hour on Nippon TV. And this comes to you from the Rikidozan Training Center. We have a junior heavyweight championship match as your main event. I would call it the main event because it's a real match.
Well, you might call it the main event, but I don't know if Rikidozan will.
Michiaki Yoshimura versus Surigami.
So a rematch.
And in this, it is a rematch. And Michiaki Yoshimura would win this match 2-1 in about 16 minutes. With Surigami getting the first pin, Yoshimura getting the second 2 falls, one with a leg lock and the final fall with a surfboard. We actually have the finish, which is nice. And then here's where we get into the practice match.
This is the main event. You can call it whatever you want.
So Rikidozan agrees to have practice events or practice matches with a bunch of undercard dudes, and just to get them some time in the ring with Rikidozan, where Rikidozan doesn't have to pay anybody. He's just showing up in his own gym, and he's letting the young boys try to wrestle him a little bit. I will go through these names, hopefully only once. I have. Oh, how horrible. Nagasawa Hichi, Takemura Masaki, Tomonagawa Masayuki, Tanaka Yonataro, Rashomon Kagoro.
That's your boy,
and,
Rashomon.
Yeah, big boy. Yoshidagawa Seishiro. And he just is little short exhibition matches. None of them go longer than one goes just a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And this would be the format of this show for a while, where it would show these
every week. Watch
guys.
Rikidozan beat up 6 people, basically sparring matches.
Super. I'll say it's super cheap, and at least they give you one real match on the show that's more of a traditional match.
I don't ever want to hear anybody complain about Hulk Hogan going over every week on Nitro again, because this is Rikidozan going over 6 men every week on his TV program.
Yep. So we have that match from June 15th, June 22nd. Let's see. We have a All Japan Tag Championship match on that time slot. Azuma Fuji and Nagasawa against Hichi versus Surigami and Michiaki Yoshimura. So now you have Yoshimura and Surigami teaming up.
Yes, and a tag team title match, the title of which doesn't count because it doesn't exist. It's just another one of those.
It's not real. Don't worry about it. And then we get more practice matches or sparring matches, depending on what you want to call them. And I'm not going to tell you who he fought, but it's all undercard guys, and it's weird.
It's really seriously funny when you go back and look at the results. Anybody who purchases the Patreon and goes back and looks at any of this stuff, Dan, they're going to see Rikidozan. I mean, 5 or 6 guys every week. He's going in there in a light workout, 2-minute matches, pretty much up and down. So many of the guys a lot less than 2 minutes. So,
you know how I said I was sad that the television footage from way back in the 50s wasn't all preserved? I'm not crying too hard that I don't get to see a bunch of practice matches that run under 2 minutes with Rikidozan against the undercard guys.
Well,
not crying too hard about it.
No, but you know what? Unless there's a lot of downtime in between, at least it's fast and over with, right? So I'd like to see it once. I mean, I feel like once you've seen one of these practice weeks, you've seen them all. I would have to imagine.
That's how I feel about it.
You said it goes on for a while, so that's very interesting. Wonder when they realize they need to change up the format, or is it forced upon them? We'll have to wait and see what happens there. I don't know where you're headed next here.
But we make it to June 29th, I believe. We made it past June 22nd, June 29th, same place. Now, this one's interesting because they feature a junior heavyweight championship match with Yoshimura against Yoshino Sato,
who was the light heavyweight champion.
Trying to move up already. And Yoshino Sato actually gets the first fall with a pin in 13:45. Yoshimura gets the pin to even things at 8 minutes later, and then they go to a 45-minute time limit.
Huh.
Now, in this one, I believe, based on the TV listing, we don't get Rikidozan with his sparring matches against 6 or 7 guys. It's just that junior heavyweight match. That's an episode I wouldn't mind seeing because Yoshino Sato is a legit junior heavyweight champion, and Michiaki Yoshimura is also probably one of the best workers that JWA has at this time.
Yeah, no, I think they made a good call here. If they weren't going to do their normal format, that's definitely a match I would have put on there. And again, you go back, they're both champions. I mean, we don't see the light heavyweight title on the line here, and I'm not really sure based on how real professional wrestling was in Japan at this point in time, how a light heavyweight can compete for a junior heavyweight title, but that's what we see here. And it's kind of cool to see names like this on TV and given 45 minutes to shine.
Maybe you're always allowed to move up a weight division and fight for a heavier title, which puts you at like a disadvantage, unless I'm getting the weights wrong. We looked at this a year and a half ago in wrestling history, so I can't remember which is the heavier group. Is the junior or is
heavier.
It the light?
Junior's heavier.
Okay, if that's the case, then that means Yoshino Sato was moving up from light heavyweight to face a junior heavyweight, which puts him at a disadvantage, correct?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with Yoshino Sato moving forward. Are they going to continue to try to move him up a level as far as weight class goes, or is he going to move back down to just defending that light heavyweight title? So going to be cool to kind of follow him and see what he does moving forward here in 57. But as we fast forward another week, unless you have something else you want to touch on there, another card and another 6 matches of Rikidozan going, these sparring matches, if you will, on this card July 6th. But there's also some notes here I have in regards more stuff involving Hiro Matsuda.
I believe I've got the same thing. But July 6th, we have practice matches with Rikidozan against most of the same guys we've already talked about.
Yeah.
But we also have an All Japan heavyweight ranking match, which is an effort to probably set up for a singles match with Rikidozan. Yokichi Endo, hey, look who's back. And he faces Nagasawa Hiichi. And for the junior heavyweight championship, you have Michiaki Yoshimura versus Matamichi Dadoyama. And I don't know anything about this guy. It's also seen as Daidozan, and he's getting a title match against Michiaki Yoshimura. So I guess they have some designs with him. He does get a fall on Yoshimura.
Well, how fun is this? Kokichi Endo reappears out of nowhere, out of the blue. How cool is it to be friends with the promoter? You automatically walk right into a heavyweight ranking match.
Yep. It's nice when you're the number one guy. You're the number one right-hand man to the number one guy, the guy who's running the show,
right.
The friend of the boss. So after this card, like you were saying, you were alluding to, Matsuda left the JWA and didn't wrestle in Japan again until 1966. This is 1957, folks. He's going to leave for 9 years. And by the time he comes back, he changes his name to Hiro Matsuda. There is an interview from 1997 where Koji Miyamoto asked Matsuda why he quit so soon after he made his debut, and he had answered he'd already lost his respect for Rikidozan in that event in Okinawa we spoke of, and there was another decisive incident that occurred in Tokyo. And this is directly from Hiro Matsuda. One day, Rikidozan came into our gym and wanted to work out with me. Though he tried hard to beat me, he could never take me down. He got furious and cried to me, "You need to be a high-ranking sumo wrestler before you become a real pro wrestler. Go to sumo." And Matsuda talked back and said, "I don't have to make a name for myself in sumo to become a good American-style wrestler," defying Rikidozan. And having defied the Rikidozan publicly, it was impossible for this curtain raiser, they call him, to continue working in the JWA. The young wrestler was determined to achieve success in America. Unfortunately, he didn't have a sponsor or a promoter who would come to his guarantor and invite him to America. In fact, he didn't have any connections at all. My dream won't come true, is what Hiro Matsuda thought. Relegated to helping his father at his vegetable store in Yokohama, Matsuda became quite frustrated and lost confidence in himself, but he didn't stop training and practiced karate very hard under a good instructor. Unable to stand by with folded arms, his mother gave him some good advice. She advised him to write a letter to her old friend who had settled in Peru with other Japanese immigrants. He was lucky enough to enter into negotiations with Max Aguirre, a Peruvian promoter. I have not yet finished my research on wrestling in Peru, so I'm not familiar with Max Aguirre. But apparently Peru had wrestling at the time. And this promoter gave Matsuda a 1-month contract and a little money. Aguirre also helped Matsuda get a visa, which allowed him to work in Peru. More than 3 years had gone by since he quit the JWA, and now he was getting the opportunity to move towards his goals. And we can talk more about the Hiro Matsuda history when we get to it. But I just wanted to cover that part where he knew he wasn't impressed with Rikidozan from the start.
Right.
And then when Rikidozan wanted to spar with him and he couldn't take him down, he was trying to banish him to sumo because he dared make Rikidozan look bad. And instead of agreeing to it, he says, "I don't need that to be a pro wrestler." At least Hiro Matsuda was smart enough to realize
you have to give him credit.
His JWA days were done.
Yeah, you have to give him credit, though, to be a rookie and have that much, wherewithal to go, well, you know what, I'm going to go do this somewhere else because I'm not dealing. A lot of people, I'm sure, tried to break in, and not just in Japan, but in the States, and maybe somebody got in their way, like a Rikidozan, and they just, they left the wrestling business. Not Hiro Matsuda. He went to different countries to pursue his career in professional wrestling, and he did a damn good job.
He did, and the history of Hiro Matsuda deserves its own series, his own podcast, much less just one episode on our Japanese wrestling history style podcast.
Well, as we move on here in the show, I see a lot of the same. I know they take a week off, looks like July 13th, and then they're back in action on TV the following week. A lot of the same stuff. They change up some things. We get a quote-unquote tag team title here. I'm looking right now, July 27th, by the way. And I see Rikidozan is acting as the referee. So he's not working the 6 men in the sparring matches here. Instead, he's still keeping his face on TV, though, Dan. He's the referee in a matchup with Endo and Yoshino Sato over Azuma Fuji and Nagasawa. And it's just kind of funny here because they create a new Japanese tag team title just to try and create interest, but they find out that the fans, before too long, they have no interest in 2 Japanese versus 2 Japanese. They want 2 Japanese versus 2 Gaijin. And so the tag titles seem to disappear here for a couple of years.
Yeah, this is still, the wound is still fresh from 12 years prior. And I still think that the formula that the fans have been conditioned to look for is the Japanese main eventers against the foreign invaders. And when you're leading with these all Japan tag matches, meaning tag matches with all Japanese guys in them, it's a little less exciting for them. That's not what they're looking for. That's not the conflict. And maybe it's that they haven't even tried to run an angle or establish bad blood between them. Otherwise, it's just not what they're looking for. I will draw your attention to the July 20th episode only for this point. In Rikidozan's practice match, he actually wrestles 2 people. He wrestles Azuma Fuji and Kokichi Endo. So it's one of those 3-way matches.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that.
Which is just interesting. It's observation.
I'm very curious how that worked back then. I still haven't been able to get any details on that.
I wonder if it was like, what was the 3-way, the ECW kind of pay-per-view from 1994? You remember that 3-way dance?
3-way dance, yeah.
Sabu, Terry Funk, and who else?
Shane Douglas.
Of course, Shane Douglas. Oh, ECW is fun.
Well, I'm scrolling through, and if we sit here hitting on every TV, I know we will be here for 6 hours. And I don't want to do that to the people, just rambling off results. So if you're cool with it, man, we can scroll forward to the next tour, unless you see something else. The International Competitions Tour, taking place from August 13th through September 25th. 35 cards. Guest foreigners, Gaijin on this tour, guys. Hey, these are actual American talents. Bulldog Danny Pletches, Lord Athel Layton. Well, I don't know about American, but Lord Layton is here for this tour. And wow, Bobo Brazil coming over. And actually, I posted one of Bobo's matches. I don't know if it was from this tour or one of the following tours, but I just posted it recently on my YouTube for everybody to go check out.
He probably looked pretty good in 1957.
He can move.
Yep. And so this tour, he's got money. I don't know where he got it from. Maybe he got it from all these TV episodes he's bringing in.
Oh, I have an idea where he got it from.
Well, let's not talk about that.
No, we won't get ahead yet.
So now we've got real wrestlers, and it's only 3. So it's kind of bare bones cards. We would not put you through the torture of going through every house show result or even TV results, because now we're on weekly TV. It's a little less special, let's be honest.
And best I could tell in regards to this tour, Dan, and you can cover whatever you want, but when I went through and I did my research, best I could tell was Rikidozan was married to Bobo Brazil, either in singles or tag team matches pretty much every night of the tour.
100% of the 3 guys that came in, Bobo Brazil was definitely the headliner, and that's where Rikidozan was. And whether it was a singles match or a tag match, a lot of tag matches. He did have the singles match on August 14th, and that was in front of a crowd of 12,000 people at the Metropolitan Gym in Tokyo. And that went, I don't even know how long it went. It went over 30 minutes because Rikidozan got a count out of ring on Bobo in 31 minutes, and the second fall was considered a forfeit, but it doesn't have a time. So they're going long distance here for their singles match, but it's a lot of Rikidozan rotating with different tag partners such as Toyonbori, Azuma Fuji, Kokichi Endo, against Bobo Brazil and some of the other folks that had come over.
Looking at that and that airing on TV, that August 14th card with Bobo in front of 12,000 fans. But watching that on TV, it does make Rikidozan sort of a superhero in a way, because Japanese fans weren't really conditioned to seeing guys the size of a Bobo Brazil, right? I mean, he was kind of a monster in many ways.
He was a monster. Now, what about the boxer from before, a couple years before? He wasn't small, but he was certainly no Bobo Brazil. That guy was a sight to behold. Kind of ugly guy that was in a million movies.
Oh, Primo Carnera. Yes.
Yeah, he was a boxer, but
yeah.
He wasn't nearly as big as Bobo Brazil. And you were talking about some of these matches that end up on TV. Thank goodness they do, because once you get away from the televised matches, I had warned you before that unless the major newspapers were covering the wrestling shows, no one knew what the heck happened. So there are a lot of matches for this 35-show tour that all we have is one match, and there are several shows we have no information on whatsoever.
I think It's safe to say on those, because we have every show we do have results for or a match for, it does involve Rikidozan and Bobo Brazil in some way, shape, or form across the ring from each other. So I think it's safe to say they worked each other every night of the tour. But yeah, it really is unfortunate after having so many detailed results for earlier shows before 1957 to come into this tour and have such a small amount of results in front of our faces here. But still, it looks like Tayono Bori's doing a lot of tag teaming here with Rikidozan on this tour.
That's what I noticed too. As the tour goes on, you start to see Rikidozan and Tori Bori a lot more often than Rikidozan and Endo or Rikidozan and Azuma Fuji. And Bobo Brazil appears to be pretty much married with Danny Pletchis, Bulldog Danny Pletchis, for most of these tag matches.
Yeah.
So it's where these results are lost to time at this point. But I may have to set up a GoFundMe, see if I can't get some of the magazines from this time frame.
Oh.
There's got to be information out there somewhere. I know that there are multiple magazines running in 1957, but I'm gathering that even the results weren't on those either. Unfortunately, we can't offer you complete shows or even any data on some of these house shows other than the date and the location.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. In 1958, we'll have a little bit of the same just to give you a preview. But after that, it goes away and we start getting much more coverage of the day-to-day shows for JWA.
We're slowly matriculating our way down the field of the 1950s, guys. We're almost near the end. We're almost hitting 1960. And like you said, I think right around 59, 60, things bust open, wide open as far as regards to results and information and whatnot. So I'm just glad we got everything we have and all the digging and everything you've done to get us this far.
Yeah, I did what I could, and I'd love to be able to just break down every single house show, the attendance and all the data that is available. But sometimes you don't have access to that much.
No, and I'm sure over time, maybe you'll acquire a random magazine or a book or more information from someone out there, a listener that may have something for us, and we'll be able to go back and kind of add this to the story as we go along with the podcast. So there's always time to go back, as we find new things.
Sure, we can always fill in the blanks because it looks like 99% of all of it's right here. So we just need to help them out a little bit if that's an option in the future. But one thing to say overall about this tour, this 35 house show tour, is that the crowds were down during the time and finances were tight. And Rikidozan was hoping that the arrival of the NWA World Heavy Champion would stimulate business. Lou Thesz was overwhelmed with attention when he arrived at the Haneda Airport in Tokyo, and he seemed to have been impressed so deeply that he described it in detail in his autobiography, Hooker, which I own. Quote, "I was genuinely shocked. In fact, when our plane landed, I saw a mob of people. The newspapers estimated the crowd at 15,000 behind the fences, like the Beatles almost. I was looking around the plane to see if I could spot what might have attracted them, a movie star or some prime minister or other important personality. But the airline crew said that they were there to welcome me, the first world champion to ever visit Japan. That's when I began to suspect that pro wrestling had an enormous future in Japan. Riki and a man named Mr. Benboku Ono, a very important member of the Japanese Diet, which is the governmental legislature of Japan, met us at the foot of the ramp and marched us straight into the terminal to a press conference where there were maybe 100 cameras and twice as many reporters. It was a very impressive thing. I'd certainly never had a reception like that in the States." During Lou Thesz's flight from Australia to Tokyo, Thesz was fuming at what promoter Dick Lane had done to him, or Dick Lean. He had to pay Australian taxes on his wrestling payoffs before he left Sydney Airport.
Wow. Make sure they get theirs.
That stinks. But the red carpet treatment at Haneda Airport calmed him down and made him very proud. Thesz also said that he felt like Rikidozan paid him great respect by admitting Lou's abilities surpassed his own. So that is super impressive that Rikidozan puts over somebody beyond himself.
Yeah, you're telling me. That's an understatement. But I think he knew. I think he knew what he was dealing with here in regards to Lou Thesz, for sure.
And don't you want to put over the guy you're about to wrestle?
Oh, absolutely. You talked about Thesz saying, there might have been 15,000 people, or the news people were quoted as saying roughly 15,000 people there. I saw in the footage of King Kong Zaya getting off the plane and how many people were there for him, so I can believe 15,000 people for Lou Thesz.
Yeah, and Lou Thesz may have heard rumblings about that by other people and probably just dismissed it, going, yeah, whatever. And then when they showed up for him, it was like, wow, they weren't kidding around. This is serious business here. So the interviewer that had spoken with Lou Thesz about this subject thought that the respect came from the time when Rikidozan was training for his debut match under Oki Shikina in Hawaii. Oki had held Thesz in high esteem since they first met in Los Angeles in 1936. More than likely, the trainer repeated over and over how great Thesz was, and his comments planted deep roots in Rikidozan's subconscious mind. That and the fact that Rikidozan needed money. Rikidozan must have confirmed Oki's impression of Lou after wrestling him in Honolulu in 1953. Having been confined to wrestling in Hawaii and California, Rikidozan had never met other top stars like Buddy Rogers, Antonino Rocca, or Vern Gagne. Lou was the best pure wrestler Rikidozan had ever met, and everyone he ever talked to about Lou with a feeling of awe in their voice. Lou was the best pure wrestler Rikidozan had ever met, and there's a long list of people that would say Lou was the best pure wrestler they had met as well.
And this tour was actually the Lou Thesz tour, the World Championship Series tour that was coming here in October. It was supposed to start on October 6th at the Korakuen Stadium, but the show immediately postponed until the next day due to heavy rain. So unfortunately, the Japanese wrestling gods were not with Rikidozan on October 6th, but only a day postponed, and they're ready to roll, it looks like.
It certainly looks like that. It did not hurt the attendance for them to delay this show one day, because on October 7th, there are two different reports. One says 22,000. The other says 30,000 people for Korakuen Stadium. Now, this one, it was televised live, this match. I should say the main event was for the World Heavyweight title, Lou Thesz against Rikidozan.
The NWA World Heavyweight title, I'll have you guys know.
That is the World Heavyweight title, absolutely. Not a fake one at all. This match was televised live, and it was also filmed for a movie. And it achieved an unbelievably high audience rating of 87%.
Ooh.
That's like a Tecmo Bowl number. That doesn't even make sense. So 87% of all televisions at that time in 1957 were watching Lou Thesz versus Rikidozan.
Yeah, so you guys can take your ratings and demos and you can put them somewhere, because my God, think about that. And you talk about some of the territories, later on, and some of the numbers they did in the ratings and whatnot, the local ratings. But man, I don't know if anybody ever hit 87%. That's basically 90%, right? So that's 9 out of every 10 television sets in Japan was watching Lou Thesz versus Rikidozan.
That is just unimaginable. And what a high watermark. No one could ever approach that. I know that in the glory days of Memphis, they were locally drawing ratings of 50?
Yeah, it was high.
Something super high, but 87 is 87. And even if it's a little bit embellished and it was 77 instead of 87, there's nothing in second place. It's still a ridiculous rating.
You know what's kind of interesting, too, before you get into the matchup and whatnot? I noticed Al Karasik, actually, the promoter in Hawaii, Al Karasik, actually comes over here for this tour. He wanted to see this for his own with his own eyes, Rikidozan, Lou Thesz, what it would do out here in Japan. Maybe he really wanted to get a good idea of what could be here.
I wouldn't be surprised, because now that he's hearing that people are making, or, somebody's making money here, or this might be fertile ground for promoting, I can understand why he would want to come over and see for himself. Speaking of that, the other two guest foreigners, we call them, are Harold Sakata, which has been in before, but he's more popular in America, but he's coming in, and Danny Pletches.
Danny Pletches returns from the last tour. Harold Sakata's been here. He was here on the first tour back in whatever that was, 51, I believe it was. And
very early. So let's see. This appears to be coming from Lou Thesz's book. We agreed to wrestle to a draw in our 8 title matches. Carrying Riki for 60 minutes was a tough job. We did that in Tokyo on the first night, but I suggested we shouldn't do the same in Osaka. We took one fall each, and then we were both counted out of the ring in the third fall. Our last match was held in Okinawa because we were able to get big US dollar cash only in Okinawa those days. Rikidozan paid me $10,000 for each title match in Tokyo and Osaka and $5,000 for all the other bouts. That made $25,000 in all. That doesn't make sense because I thought he did 8 title matches. Meh. Either way, $25,000 in 1957 is a ton of money. That is, you're buying multiple houses with that amount of money in 1957.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, that's just outrageous amounts. But the history of wrestling...
Inflation calculator says 1957, $10,000. Well, just for the one night, $10,000. And today's money is almost $114,000.
Yep, and believe it or not, that buys you houses because the housing prices back then were so much less. The inflation of housing prices in the last 60 years has been unprecedented and certainly doesn't follow regular inflation.
But just, think about that for a moment, though. Lou Thesz works an hour and makes himself $114,000 in today's money.
Yeah, that is absolutely insane. We have the source for the rating of 87%, according to Dentsu. There is a discussion on, it was an unofficial survey. But again, what are we talking about? 87 or 77? It's still the highest, the most people who've ever watched one thing ever, certainly for a sporting event.
Right.
So it's absolutely crazy. So that's your October 7th show, coming off of the delay of one day for rain. And we move on to the next show, which was in Osaka, 13th of October. And this is in the Ogimachi pool. So we get a pool match. 27,000 or 30,000, and this one was on live TV as well.
And this is where they do the double count out for the third fall to take it home. Much shorter match nice. This time around. I'm sure Lou was hey, what do you say we go about half that length and we'll still make the same amount of money. 32
minutes works just fine for me.
Yeah.
And I'll still make 10 grand. Why don't we do it cheaper? And in order to make up for not going to the 1 hour draw, the semi-main with Azuma Fuji and Kokichi Endo go to a 45-minute draw against Danny Pletchis and Harold Sakata. So they were able to fill up the hour and 15-minute time slot pretty easily there with the end of the tag match. And I'm figuring the entire Thesz Rikidozan match. Let's see. The promoter told the press that this was a record-breaking crowd at the show, and the attendance was 30,000. Once again, attendance figures in general should always be taken with a grain of salt, since promoters often padded the numbers to make their shows look more popular than they really were. More than likely, the number of people in attendance was inflated. That phrase, I feel like that should be a PSA. That should be added on to every time we ever speak of attendances.
I thought Vince invented that, pal. I thought he was the inflation king of the attendance, but apparently not. Believe it or not, guys, it was taking place long before Vincent Kennedy McMahon did it. It wasn't just wrestling, though. We would see everybody flub their figures a little bit to look a little better than they actually were, not just in professional wrestling, but in a lot of, not just sports, but in a lot of events, period.
Exactly. And it's just to make it seem like a bigger event. And not to belabor the point, this is a real quick story. 2012, I'm watching online. It was like streaming All Japan Champion Carnival matches from 2012.
Yeah.
And they did one in Korakuen Hall that they claimed had 1,500 people in it. I counted because there were so few. I think there might have been 200 people in the chairs. I was just so stunned that there were that few people for a Champion Carnival match. But this was the dark days of All Japan. So, again, take all attendances with a grain of salt. But when they're all lying, then they're all equally, believable, I guess. That's the way I look at it. I don't trust any of them.
Well, we can fast forward here to October 14th. Sure. If you're ready. I'll call it a fun story. What the hell? And I'll let you tell it to everyone.
That's just another fun story in the wacky world of Japanese professional wrestling. The headline, Japanese mat TV viewers hurt when floor collapses. 14 excited television viewers suffered slight injuries Sunday night when the floor of a jammed room gave way just as Japan's pro wrestling idol, Rikidozan, tried to pin America's Lou Thesz. More than 40 people jam-packed into a small 9 by 12-foot room. 40 people in a 9 by 12-foot room. Here to watch the telecast of the match billed for the World Championship at Osaka, police said Monday. Fans began jumping with excitement, police said, when the Japanese wrestler began hacking his opponent with deadly hand chops. The floor caved in.
Could you imagine everybody jumping up and down, and there goes the floor?
Clutching some 20 persons to the ground 6 feet below. Thankfully.
Wow.
The title match ended in a draw.
So it wasn't even worth it. You know,
yeah,
at least you can tell the story. Each one a fall.
And including 20 people who also got a fall.
They all got a fall. Yeah, everybody got a fall that night. I was going to say, at least if I got hurt and Rikidozan won the NWA World title, it would have all been worth it, right? But instead, he takes a fall, we take a fall. Yeah. They didn't get paid to take the fall, I would have to imagine, though.
That's true. Well, they're working for free. They're rookies. We'll move on to the 15th in Fukuoka.
Back to a 60-minute draw there.
Yep, 60-minute draw. The 16th in Hiroshima. That's 2-1, and that match ends fast. That match ends in about 32 minutes.
Yeah.
Fast for them. The 17th in Kobe. This one goes really short. This one only goes 25 minutes, with Thesz winning 2-1. The 19th in Nagoya. This one runs very short as well. This one's a double knockout in 22 minutes. Boy, these guys are getting their money's worth. In front of 6,000 people, though. 21st of October in Sendai in the Hyojo Kawara Stadium, 10,000 people. This one, they go 1-1 with a double countout this time, and that one doesn't even go 20 minutes. 10,000 people show up for under 20-minute main event. What is this, Nitro? The 24th in Okinawa in front of 13,000. This one, actually, the main event's a tag match. Rikidozan and Torian Bori against Lou Thesz and Danny Plechis. That goes to a draw, but I don't know the time, whether it's 45 minutes or 60. And then we move to the final show of the tour in Okinawa. And again, the main event, Lou Thesz versus Rikidozan. They go 40 minutes before the final fall being a double knockout.
So every match throughout this tour, if you want to call it a tour, between Rikidozan and Thesz one-on-one either ends in a draw or a double countout, double DQ, a schmoz, as the Hitman would say, if you will. But I noticed, going back to Kobe on the 17th of October, it's actually Lou Thesz scoring a pinfall, if this is accurate. A pinfall win in the first fall, Rikidozan getting an arm lock win for the second fall, and then Thesz coming back in a 2-minute pinfall for the third fall. So it looks like Lou Thesz did walk out at least with one win out here over Rikidozan. But I can say this much, Rikidozan never got a Duke over Lou Thesz.
No. No, he's not ready for that yet. Heck, his promotion is not in good shape, and it's still kind of fresh. So there's no value to having the NWA champion from Japan. How the heck are you going to tour America with that? It is the National Wrestling Alliance, not the World Wrestling Alliance.
True that. So where does that take us now? Getting down to the nitty-gritty here, huh?
Yeah, we've got there's one tour left that goes from November 27th to December 21st. And again, it's just full of unknown things. But I do have some notes here I'm reading through talking about Rikidozan negotiating for what appears to be the profits for a tour, and saying he wanted to be a 50-50 partner, and talking about basically Rikidozan being a shrewd businessman is what this is getting at. By bringing in other promotions and making them feel like they were part of the overall picture, he helped publicize tournaments to their own demographic. However, by the time the tournaments ended, wrestling fans all realized that Rikidozan's promotion was the dominant group, and they looked at the smaller groups as second rate. And the independent promotions houses dropped precipitously, and they were soon out of business. So this is a little bit of an incomplete story, but what it talks about is working with other promotions, agreeing, but in the end, they just get enveloped by them or assimilated by them, like the Borg in the Star Trek show.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only one of them's got a regular TV slot. So everyone's getting eaten up by Rikidozan, and only through his benevolence does he cherry pick a couple of wrestlers from these independent promotions that look halfway decent and let them continue to work. But in doing so, he really strips them, the independent promotions, bare, and they go out of business soon after.
So based on these numbers, though, going back quickly to the Thesz matches with Rikidozan and the numbers they were doing with the drawing, and obviously the 87% rating as far as how many fans were watching it from home and wherever they were watching it from, that boosts business back up for the short term. But they, like you said, they almost immediately go back into another tour in November. It's going to last into, I believe, the beginning of January in 1958. And no Lou Thesz on that tour, however. So business begins to immediately plummet once again financially here.
Yeah, the last series of matches with Lou Thesz, really, it's tough to consider it a tour, even though it took up 3 weeks. There were only 7 total shows. So it's not much of a tour. It was really just going Rikidozan versus Lou Thesz, doing that in a bunch of different places. But this tour here coming in November 27th to December 21st, 1957, that one would be a little bit different because it appears that Rikidozan is traveling and he's in Taiwan.
Yeah, I believe he promotes his first show there.
He's
first
bringing
show in Taiwan.
More than a couple guys. He's got Yoshimura, he's got Nagasawa, he's got Surigami, Osama Aobi, he's got Rashomon, Yusuf Turk. So he's bringing most of the crew to Taipei, Taiwan, to wrestle.
And the only gaijin on that tour appears to be, well, Hiro Sakata, obviously. He's worked here before, but also a guy by the name of Bill Savage. And I'm assuming Bill Savage is not going to draw like a Lou Thesz.
Not quite at that level. But one note we do have is in Taiwan, Rashomon, the 6'8" guy, that's his hometown. And attracted a capacity audience. So we don't know exactly how big that audience is, but the big guy finally draws a show. He should be demanding a push after this. Thanks to Lou Thesz's great popularity, business recovered for a while, but Bill Savage is, like you said, ain't no Lou Thesz.
Right.
We don't have the results for Kanoya, Miyazaki, or Saiki. No results known for Hita or Amuta. Well, we got the main event, Rikidozan and Torianbori against Savage and Sakata.
And where's
the
that?
Main event? That's in this Muta. It's December 15th,
I'm with you. I
1957.
found it.
Oh, good. Well, we're about to head back to Japan proper on December 20th in Osaka TV Network Studio. So this is a proper studio, TV studio, where they're going to have a wrestling show now.
Right.
And this one had, all in
1 hour.
hour.
Yeah.
Wow. They're moving fast here. They have 4 different matches here I'm seeing. Rikidozan versus Bill Savage, Torianbori versus Nagasawa, a tag match, and
a prelim.
Holy smokes. And it was live, too. I don't have the times for it, but I can't imagine any of the matches went very long. So that was on Osaka TV specifically, called Pro Wrestling Hour. And that would start, that is the re-beginnings of the weekly wrestling show. It took a break for a while, and it came back. So now we have it starting right at the end of December, and it would run to March of 1958.
Right, which we'll get into on the next episode. Is TV is going to evolve, so to speak, over the next couple years here in Japan. But it's this is the beginnings of it, not just as we talked in the last couple of years here, where they've aired some matches from some arenas and whatnot. But here it's more of the studio stuff and more of a weekly deal, and it's going to go bi-weekly and then weekly again permanently eventually as we continue on here. But it's just very interesting to see whenever they have a tour, they're getting this TV proper. So the fans kind of have an idea of what to expect, and it looks like we've departed from the Rikidozan versus 6 guys ordeal anyway.
Yes, there are still some exhibition matches, but not that 6-guy business. And I should say that this episode on Osaka TV is not what Nippon Television is airing. This Osaka TV network is airing a show called Pro Wrestling Hour. And that's what we just talked about. The very next day in Tokyo, there's a show called Fight Men Hour. That's the one that's on Nippon TV, sponsored by Mitsubishi.
Yeah, that's the one we discussed earlier in the program.
Yeah, so this is the Friday show. So now there's a Friday show, but it's running just on Osaka TV, and it just started. We still have the Fight Men Hour show from Nippon TV, and that aired the next day on Saturday, December 21st. And this went for an hour and a half, and I don't know half of these guys, but it's claiming that there were like 7 matches. I'm not going to even say anything other than there's an exhibition match with Rikidozan versus Bill Savage at the end.
Well, that's kind of important because it looks like that's the end of Rikidozan here for quite a substantial amount of time in regards to working in Japan anyway.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of giving a spoiler to what we're going to be talking about for 1958, but we'll say it here. Rikidozan doesn't wrestle again in Japan until September 5th, 1958. It's December 21st in 1957. He will not be back for over 9 months.
Yeah, about
he
9
made
months.
a few appearances in Honolulu and California during July and August, but other than that, he was nowhere to be found.
Wonder why that is, Dan.
Well, he didn't wrestle in TV matches during this time, but appeared as a referee or commentator. More than likely, he kept himself busy training and following his other activities, filming, looking for sponsors, and TV commentating. And his quote was about his disappearance was, "Now that I fought Lou Thesz, the best wrestler in the world, I don't want to meet any other average wrestler in the ring. I'm feeling drained out." What is that? Does that mean he lost his smile?
I thought that's exactly what that meant. Apparently, Rikidozan loses his smile here at the end of 1957. We'll have to wait and see if he recovers in a couple weeks after he doesn't have to drop a title belt to someone, but that's another guy for another day. But so it's kind of interesting, and I wish they had put quotation marks around other activities in regards to what Rikidozan was doing outside of the wrestling ring. But
we'll leave that for the beginning of next episode.
I love it. What a great teaser to kick off the next episode. What was Rikidozan really doing here, guys, for the next several months? Well, we're going to get into that deep into the next episode, and it's very intriguing, very entertaining. I'm looking forward to that, Dan.
Yeah. Before we leave on December 27th, there's another episode of that Osaka TV in the studio. And then the next day, we have the Pro Wrestling Fight Men Hour on Nippon TV for December 28th, the last show of the year. And that, again, I don't know how the heck they do it. This one's an hour and a half, so they fit 6 matches in an hour and a half. And it's all the guys other than Rikidozan. So now we're closing out at the end of 1957. We have 2 weekly wrestling shows, one on Friday and one on Saturday. All right, well, that's it. We made it. 1957 is done. Television has started. It's in the books, yeah. We can mark it down, cut, print, write the check. It's in the books. We made it, and Rikidozan disappeared before the end of the year because he wanted to work on other things.
Sure he did.
We'll talk about other things.
Other things.
Next
we'll get a little more
episode.
detailed into those other things, Dan, for sure.
Yeah, wait till you guys get a load of what he's been doing.
1958, I will not call it uneventful because that alone is plenty to talk about, but it feels like there may not be enough substance in general to navigate just 1958 on the next episode, so I wouldn't be surprised if we may even touch on a little of 1959 as well, but no promises there, guys. But yeah, we do have some cool things to talk about when we get to 1958 next time around.
Yeah, I apologized ahead of time. 1958 is similarly lean in results and data. And
well, Rikidozan's gone for about 9 months, right?
Yeah, and when Rikidozan's gone for 9 months of it, and we can't even keep track of what he's doing, there ain't much to talk about. So it'll probably be a combo episode. I don't know if it'll go extra long in order to accommodate 1959, but we're going to do our darndest to keep you entertained and keep this train a-rolling.
I love it, guys. As the years continue on here, Dan continues to tell the story of Japanese professional wrestling history. Of course, like I said, maybe we have omitted something. Maybe we looked over something. I don't see how. Dan is really digging deep for this stuff, but I know there's stuff out there that we don't have information for that will pop up in time. We will go back and cover that. If you're listening to us talk about certain talents that you want to learn a little bit more about, I'm sure as time progresses, you will hear us speak a little more about those particular wrestlers. So just stay tuned for that, guys. In the meantime, Dan, appreciate it here once again this week. Another great episode, very entertaining, very informative. And the best is yet to come because it just keeps getting bigger and better every year.
Yeah, every year you go through and you figure, well, that was crazy. And the next year is even crazier. I cannot wait to cover 1958 and moving forward. We're about to hit 1960, and I hope you all know what happens in 1960. There's a couple of new guys that get involved in Japanese wrestling that you may have heard of, but that's another year or two away. So in the meantime, class is dismissed.